Hello and welcome to another lesson, this time in energy use and a balanced diet. Reminder about these presentations: so the yellow text boxes refer to the tasks for students, the green text boxes are the student note-taking sections, the blue text boxes are differentiation tasks, and the red text boxes are the teaching and learning strategies and ideas for the practitioners. So for this specific topic, the syllabus asks you to know about what we mean by a calorie, okay, and also the amount of calories required for males and females. We also need to know about the different factors that influence our daily calorie intake. So what things influence the amount of calories we should be consuming as human beings. And finally, understanding the importance of a balanced diet and how to apply two specific specialized sporting diet plans. So we're going to be looking at carbo loading and a high protein diet. So let's get going. So first and foremost, if we think about energy use, when we think about calories, okay, calorie is basically a unit, okay, which is provided for the amount of energy we intake from a drink or from food, okay, so that's what we may refer to as a calorie. You might see on packaging, it will be referred to as calories or kilocalories. Ultimately, when we think about energy, it's measured in KCAL, okay, so kilocalories or calories, and ultimately they are the same thing in regards to units of energy. And ultimately, as I said before, it comes from what we eat and what we drink. And ultimately, if we don't use up the calories that we intake, then they're stored within the body, and that's how we can cause muscle weight or weight gain. So if you look at the three diagrams on the right hand side, we've got our weighing scales, and this is the best way to explain it, and it might be worth drawing out. So ultimately, when we look at a balanced weight, the scales will be even. So when we intake energy, so when we intake those calories from our drink and from our food, okay, if we use up that energy through exercise, through activity, and it's the same amount, then ultimately that weight will stay balanced. However, if we take in, as the second diagram shows, if we take in more calories, more energy through food and drink than we use up, then ultimately we are going to increase our weight gain over time. And the opposite effect happens in regards to weight loss. So if we don't consume enough calories, enough energy through food and drink, and we use up more energy through exercise, through activity, then we can lose weight. So pause your video here and think about, why is a nutritionist so important in sports? Okay, so first and foremost, we need to know what a nutritionist is. So a nutritionist basically focuses on an athlete's diet, okay, so that could be within a team or an individual. And ultimately, when we think about an athlete's diet, they need to maintain a balanced diet. They need to think about whether they're trying to increase in weight gain, or whether they're trying to decrease in weight gain, or whether they're trying to keep an optimum, so keep it balanced. And ultimately, if we think of sports such as boxing, such as being a jockey, horse riding, then ultimately they need to make sure that they really focus on their actual weight, because boxers obviously have to be within a specific weight when they're fighting in their different weight categories. For example, a footballer, an invasive player, a rugby player, they need to focus on their required weight as well, in terms of being able to play at the peak of their performance. So let's look at calorie requirements next. So when we think about the required amount of calories from the government guidelines, okay, for a male it's 2,500. For a female, it's 2,000, so there's a slight difference there. And we need to know about the different factors that influence the amount of calories we should be taking in. So ultimately, they come down to these things: the age of the individual, gender, the height, the amount of energy we expend, okay, so the expenditure, and the last one, basal metabolic rate, or BMR. So again, pause your video here, just go onto YouTube or investigate. Can you watch this quick video on what is a calorie through TED Talks? Okay, so hopefully you've watched that, you've got an understanding of what a calorie is, and that's kind of been a nice introduction to this specific topic. So let's look at the first three factors in terms of individual, gender and height. So when we think about the age of an individual, that can have an influence on how many calories we need to take in. And ultimately, as we get older, we need less calories, okay? Not a significant amount, but slightly less as we get older. And ultimately, men generally require more calories than women, okay? Because men, on the whole, are normally a little bit heavier than women. And that's the same in terms of the tallness of a person. The taller a person, normally, the heavier they are. So that's the same reason in terms of why we need more calories if we're slightly taller. Pause your video here and think about this question here. How does calorie requirements differ in children? Okay, and ultimately the answer to that question is we need more calories as a child, okay? You think back to when you were in primary school and so on, you may have been flying around, being really energetic in the playground and so on, active after school and so on. And as a child, we actually burn off more energy quicker. So hence why we have bigger appetites as we're a child, we eat more and more regularly and more often and so on. And that's due to the fact that we need more calories as we're growing up and as our bodies are developing. Let's look at the other two factors in terms of energy expenditure and the BMR. So ultimately, the amount of exercise that an individual does will influence the amount of calories we take in. So if we're generally an active person, if we're, for example, a swimmer who has to train in the morning at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then even after school or after work, train again, they're going to require more calories, okay, because they're training so much. And ultimately, it's the same in terms of this basal metabolic rate. So when we talk about a metabolic rate, this is how quickly our body is able to burn that energy. And this will vary from person to person. Some people have a slow metabolic rate, so they're not able to burn off energy that quickly, whereas other people have a quick, fast, or a higher metabolic rate, which ultimately means that they can burn off quicker, they can burn off energy quicker. So again, pause the video here and I want you to investigate Michael Phelps, what his typical diet was when he was training for the Olympics. So try and YouTube it or just Google it. Okay, so hopefully you found out that Michael Phelps, for example, he required 12,000 calories in regards to his daily diet. That is a ridiculous amount, isn't it? But obviously he was training 3-4 times a day, high intensity. So he required that energy from the different food types, okay, to help him to be successful. When we think about a balanced diet, we're talking about the 7 key nutrients, aren't we, in terms of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, being the macronutrients, so the main sources of our energy and make up the most of our diet. And then we look at vitamins and minerals, fiber, and water. Okay, and more information is on a previous video in regards to nutrition and hydration. Pause your video here. What could be the physiological impacts to the body, to us as human beings, if we don't maintain a balanced diet? Okay, so let's go through this answer in terms of seeing whether you answered it correctly. So ultimately, if we don't maintain a balanced diet, we can suffer from different illnesses, different diseases. And one of those could be, for example, obesity. So if we're eating the wrong amount of foods or too much food, then ultimately we might get an increase in weight. And extreme overweight is referred to as being obese, okay, so where we eat too much and we're not exercising enough. We might also be the opposite end of the scale in terms of anorexia, and this sometimes is a mental health issue in regards to not wanting to eat or refusing to eat, and ultimately that will result in an extreme underweightness in our body due to the fact that we're not taking in that energy. We might also suffer from scurvy. This is the idea of we have symptoms of things like swollen, bleeding gums, bruising and joint pains, and also the fact that we lack vitamin C. And vitamin C is really important in regards to our immune system, found in lots of fruits and vegetables, for example. When we think about rickets, okay, rickets is obviously this idea where our bones fail to form properly, they fail to harden correctly, and this is normally due to a lack of vitamin D. And finally, we might also suffer from anemia, okay, and this is obviously a problem in regards to blood, okay, if we have a deficiency, so a reduction in our iron. Iron's important in regards to the formation of hemoglobin within the red blood cells. So again, pause the video here. Can you research anything to do with vitamin A, vitamin B, C, and D? Okay, so hopefully you've researched a little bit about those 4 vitamins. We don't need to know specifically in the exam about a huge amount of details of this, but this is really important if you're looking to get that 9, 8, or 7, okay? Vitamin A, really important in terms of skin, the condition of our skin and eyesight as well. Vitamin B, especially things like B12, really important in regards to red blood cell formation. Vitamin C is important in regards to the immune system, so things like oranges, blueberries, and superfoods that way are really important to help with the immune system, so to fighting off diseases. And vitamin D, where we find natural sources of that in terms of from the sun, as well as through minerals such as calcium. And that helps with obviously the maintenance of our teeth and our bones. So let's look at the two specialist diet requirements in regards to athletes that they might use. So ultimately, we know that carbohydrates are used and important for providing energy. And when we think of complex carbohydrates in particular, so things like starches, pasta, rice, bread, and so on, that energy will be stored as glycogen. And our body, when we consume that, converts that glycogen into glucose, and glucose are easier for us to break down, to give us more energy, for our working muscles when we exercise. And glycogen is obviously slow releasing. So whereas we have simple carbohydrates which are quick releasing, so things like jelly babies, sweets, and so on, the complex carbohydrates are slow releasing, and that can help in regards to endurance events. So being able to perform, whether it be for 45 minutes to an hour to a 90-minute match, for example, or whether it be to, for an endurance activity such as a long distance run. So when we think about carbohydrate preparation in terms of carbohydrate loading, first and foremost, what we will do if we're training, for example, for a marathon, the last 4 or 5 days before the event, we'll start to reduce the amount of training that we do. So we really start to taper off our training. And as we taper off our training, we also reduce the amount of carbohydrates that we've been consuming. And again, 4 or 5 days before the event, we will start to have a diet where we have little to no carbohydrates. And our body at this point is a little bit shocked, because it's thinking, well, I've been taking in lots of carbohydrates, I've been training really hard, and now I'm doing not much of the training, and I'm also doing not much of eating carbohydrates. So what we then do is we start to manipulate, we kind of trick our body in essence, because the last 24 to 48 hours, so the last day, 2 days before the event, we really increase that carbohydrate intake. So all of a sudden we've gone 4 or 5 days with little to no carbohydrates, and now we've taken a big spike in the last day or 2 days to increase that carbohydrate intake. And ultimately what this does is it manipulates, it tricks our body to actually increasing our glycogen and our energy stores, because our body thinks, well, hold on a minute, I didn't have carbohydrates for the last 4 or 5 days, now I'm starting to get it again, I need to store it for longer just in case it happens again. So that's why we carbo load. Can you think of any sports that require carbo loading? And can you think of why? So for the answer to this question, you hopefully come up with lots of different endurance activities, long distance running, marathon running, Tour de France in terms of cycling, and so on. And that helps us with the slow release of energy, being able to last for longer when we perform. So that's really important to make sure you mention that in regards to applying this theory. The second type of diet that we need to know about in terms of a specialist diet is this idea of protein, high protein diet. And athletes will do this to increase muscle mass and strength. And ultimately, they'll do this when they're looking to lift heavy weights. So weightlifters, for example, will use this. But not only that, it'll also be endurance athletes as well, who are looking to recover quicker and to prevent, obviously, muscles being torn. Now, this type of diet is a little bit debatable as to whether it works well or not and the value of it, because ultimately protein is actually difficult to digest, and ultimately it doesn't always go through our digestive system properly, so that we don't take in all of the protein required. So we still need to lift weights, we still need to do types of strength training, in order to see the benefits. It can't just be a protein diet that's going to help us to improve the peak of our performance. Again, pause your video here. What are the 2 other types of sources of energy? Okay, carbohydrates and fats would have been the answer to that question. And finally, for the practitioners, read through that. These are some good documentaries in terms of BBC, Truth About Calories, for example. Good